Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So I know it's been a little while since we've had an episode.
Yeah, we've been really busy. I was away for a bachelorette trip.
I personally have been having some health problems and I'm quite tired all the time. So we weren't really able to film some episodes. But we're back. We watched all the races.
We have.
Yeah. We will mention a little bit about Austria, and we will mostly be talking about Silverstone because it's the best race of the year.
Yeah.
One of.
It pulled all the punches.
It was everything we needed it to be.
It made it amazing. Weather crazy as per usual. I couldn't have asked for a better race. Like the weekend had me a little nervous. I was a little nervous it was gonna be a little sleepy. And then, the race just pulled out.
I think I was nervous it was going to be a little sleepy because I hate to say it, but recently F1's been a little sleepy for me. Like, yeah, there's been moments in races where I'm like, oh, this is great. But that's like a moment. The race as a whole and the weekend as a whole has not been exhilarating enough for me.
Yeah, and I don't think we mean like crashes or like.
No, but like last year was so spectacular.
Yeah, I think last year was insane, and then I think we've been watching a lot more IndyCar. We've been trying to watch it a lot more, and I think there's like so much drama happening in IndyCar right now with like Penske and just lots of problems on their end. So we've been kind of enjoying IndyCar a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we ever thought we were going to say, but we get it. Yeah. It just seems like crazier, especially like they still refuel. I feel like
when I watch an F1 race and it doesn't deliver what I want it to deliver, I can watch an IndyCar race and it's going to do it.
Yeah.
Which, oddly enough, yesterday, Silverstone delivered and the IndyCar race didn't.
It was pretty quiet. I mean, it was happy for Scott Dixon, but it was pretty quiet.
Did Scott Dixon end up winning?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I couldn't even stay awake for the whole time. I had to go to bed.
Yeah.
Because we recorded it and watched it later. I didn't need to go to bed at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That would be a little concerning.
No, yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot going on in the F1 world-ish, IndyCar-ish, and we're going to talk about all of it. I'm going to kind of do our normal format for Silverstone, and we'll sprinkle in Austria here and there.
Yeah.
The part about Austria that I do want to talk about before we kind of get into Silverstone was the really good and clean McLaren fight. After, 2 weeks ago, was that Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was Canada where Lando ended up crashing. I was nervous that McLaren was going to be like, nope, never again. But then I also was like, okay, McLaren's probably going to you get one more chance, and if you crash, we're doing team orders for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I also wonder if they were like, I mean, it's kind of similar to why they have like the chrome on their car this weekend. Like, I wonder if they were like, we have the wiggle room. Like,
yeah.
I know the drivers not so much, but I feel like I just wonder what type of conversations were had. I mean, I do think the Lewis-Niko relationship is something that a lot of those guys like grew up watching really closely.
Yeah.
So I feel like everyone trying to villainize that. I mean, again, they're colleagues, so I don't know. I think it's a mistake that happens when you're battling. I mean, we've seen, it sucks that it's teammates, but we've seen it happen before, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about quickly because it affects Silverstone is that Kimi Antonelli did end up getting a 3-place grid penalty during the Austrian Grand Prix because he ended up crashing into Max Verstappen. There's a lot of speculation going on right now with Mercedes and Max Verstappen. Honestly, both drivers. Like, I think a lot of people have no idea what's going on. I don't think we'll know what's going on. But there were all these like there was all this speculation of like because people were expecting Max to like get so angry. And Max I think is again getting older, and so he saw it was a rookie mistake. It was a mistake that other
Max
people
has always treated rookies this way though.
Yeah, I mean I think you have to like they
and
all made mistakes.
His reaction also when Kimi had crashed into him was very much like I think there's a quote from him where he said, I'm not in contention to win the championship anyways, so why does it matter?
Yeah. But yeah, so there's that drama going on in the background with conversations, I guess, being had. I mean, we're going into the summer break soon.
Yeah.
So
there's like kind of two summer breaks right now because there's
it's very confusing.
Right now until the 25th through the 27th of July. So like we have the whole month of July off basically. And then or at least 2 to 3 weeks off in July, and then there's like 3 weeks off in August. Like they're spacing it out kind of so that it's not like an entire summer break.
Yeah, but the season is just so long.
I think I'm on board with the drivers where they're like, this is too much.
Well, and then looking at like the IndyCar season, you're like, it makes sense. Like,
yeah, it's all back to back to back. It's over.
I mean, it helps that it's all in one country or like one
That does
continent.
in fact help.
Yeah, but you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it. MC.
So I think we can probably do track info and practice all in one go. It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But the official race name for this weekend was the Formula One Qatar Airways British Grand Prix 2025. We are obviously at Silverstone. That is the name of the track. What team's home race? It's McLaren?
It's McLaren, Aston, Red Bull. Red Bull has like two because they have Austria and Silverstone because their factory is in the UK.
Yeah.
Apparently
Williams, I guess.
Williams. Apparently Alpine's factory is in the UK also because Alpine was like
it's a home
points
race for
at home,
everyone.
and everyone was like, "Aren't you French?"
Okay, so everyone's home race apparently.
Mostly McLaren, Williams, and Aston. When you think about the UK, it's them.
The first Grand Prix at this racetrack was held in 1950. It's something they hold very near and dear to their heart. And then once again, I do this, I feel like at least once or twice a season. I only have the kilometers and not the miles, but you guys are listening on some sort of device, so Google it.
1 kilometer is about 0.6 of a mile, so.
So the circuit length is 5.891 kilometers, and they're doing 52 laps around this racetrack. That race distance comes out to 306.198 kilometers. The lap record is still in place. It wasn't broken this year. It was placed in 2020 by Max Verstappen in a Red Bull, and he did a fastest lap in 1:27.907 seconds. This past weekend, the fastest lap was placed by Oscar Piastri, obviously in a McLaren, and he did it in 1 minute and 29.337 seconds. So, a pretty big difference, but wind was a mega factor and something that like a lot
very
of them
stormy.
Wind, weather, like everything was, rain, it was torrential downpouring. So there are 2 DRS detection zones at Silverstone. DRS detection zone 1 is right before turn 3, and then activation begins after turn 5. There's 2 straights that work pretty nicely. DRS detection zone 2 is between turns 10 and 11, and activation begins after turn 14, so that's second straight. So that's the racetrack for Silverstone, so let's get straight into practice. So 2 changes, as per usual, we'll see throughout the season, scattered. We'll see rookie hour sessions. So Arvid Lindblad, he's a 17-year-old. He was in Yuki Tsunoda's Red Bull, which was obviously causing a ton of chatter in the paddock because
there are
yet
rumors.
Again, Red Bull...
Apparently, they really, they are the definition of insanity. They're like, let's keep throwing a new driver at the car because it's obviously the driver and not the car.
Yeah, but we're going to start to see other teams, which, we kind of already are, being more successful,
Yeah.
Like...
Well, people are like, so if Max ends up leaving Red Bull... and it's like, say, Yuki and like Liam or Yuki and Isaac in the Red Bull car. Yuki was beating Isaac in the Visa Cash App car at the beginning of the season. And so people were like, so if you take Max out of the Red Bull equation, Red Bull would be like a bottom 3 car.
Max was not happy at any point in the weekend with his car. He hasn't been happy. And I know that he complains a lot, but... he's legitimately ranted every single race about how undrivable the car is, how like nothing feels like it works. And I also wonder if he's just trying to be as vocal as possible because of Yuki. Like, he's like, if I'm struggling this much, and the fact that I wonder if this is like a learning experience, they didn't listen to Checo. So I wonder if Max knows, like, I'm the only one that they'll sort of listen to. And honestly, it doesn't sound like Red Bull's really listening to him anymore anyways.
Based off of Max's performance this weekend, I do have comments on no wonder Yuki's not moving up in the field because of... I'll get to that when we get to the actual race.
So Arvid Lindblad is in Yuki's car. And then Paul Aaron was in Niko Hulkenberg's Sauber, even though he's an Alpine reserve driver. So apparently Sauber and Alpine came to some agreement that they're just sharing him. So
okay, interesting.
There's that. But you know what? More opportunities for him. So that's
Alpine
pretty cool.
Also does have like 8 reserve drivers.
Yeah, maybe
so
Alpine was like, give the boy a try. But yeah.
Interesting.
So the only real note I have from FP1 was that Pierre and Gabby Bortoletto had a spin out at Cops. Cops was causing like a ton of problems.
This is like the most spin outs at Silverstone I've ever seen.
Yeah, I just feel like it was hot to begin with. So like the tires.
And then it was cold.
Well, and then it was just pouring. So
yeah.
The top 3 times for FP1 was Lewis, Lando, and Oscar. So tons of Brits were obviously excited by this first practice session. The only note I have for FP2 is that Lewis was starting to show really good and fast times. He didn't come in top in this session, but I think it was just this like confidence that people hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah.
So the top 3 times were Lando, Charles, and Lewis.
And fun fact, Lewis, until this weekend, had never come less than 3rd at this race.
Mm-hmm. FP3, wind gusts were a huge problem, and they'd been a problem the day before, but I think it was just a bit worse in FP3. So red flags at one point were raised due to debris on the track, and I'm not sure, like, I can't remember if it was because like debris from Ollie's crash or if like debris from another car and then that's when he crashed. But long story short, Ollie ended up crashing in the pit lane under red flags. And if you crash under red flags, it's considered by like the FIA like reckless driving because you're not supposed to crash under red flags. You're supposed to drive very cautiously.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was like I think the FIA was tough this weekend because
Ollie, they really love to use people as an example sometimes.
Ollie ended up getting a 10-place grid penalty because of that crash. So red flags were lifted. They had to clear that. Towards the very end of the session, Gabby Bortoletto lost control of his car and Maggots Beckett's, and red flags were lifted again, pretty much ending the session. So 2 pretty decent crashes for 2 teams that, in my opinion, could afford to not crash.
Yes, I agree.
So the 3 top times for that session was Charles, Oscar, and Max. So that's track info and practice.
All right, we are going to get into quali now.
Like we said, it was announced that Ollie would be getting a 10-place grid penalty because of that crash. So going into qualifying, it was like, oh shit. Like,
it was just like discouraging because I mean it's his first home race and like this was also the first time his brother Thomas, I think his name is, was racing F4 as part of the support series for F1, and so like it was the first time that both of them got to be at the same racetrack and like it was a huge deal, and for it to be your first home race, like he's already, what was it, in Monaco that he was handed like that 10-place grid penalty. Like I understand it was under a red flag, and he was probably should have been, and he's slowing down trying to get into the pit lane, but it looks like he, from what I could tell, locked up or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Sometimes I feel like the FIA just like
is a bag of dicks.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So everyone started qualifying Q1 they started off by running soft tires, which I feel like was kind of surprising because sometimes we don't get everyone on the same
At least
tire.
this season. We've been getting Aston Martin on mediums quite often.
Yeah. As we usually see at Silverstone, there was concern about rain during the session. Oscar was able to put in the fastest time for Q1, and then 8 minutes left in the session, red flags were raised. Franco hit the final corner and spun into the barriers. At first, there was like a bit of hope that he would be able to make it back to the pits, but he ultimately parked it and red flags were raised.
Yeah.
And it was just so frustrating because then they like panned to the pit wall and Flavio was just sitting there with his head in his hands. You're like, bro, like, you
People
pull
have
it
been spinning
together.
out this entire weekend.
Pull it
so
together.
Far.
So, with a little less than 7 minutes with remaining in the session, it finally resumed, but there was a bit more rain. Ferrari, as per usual, was scaring the living shit out of us because Lewis and Charles were very much in the knockout zone. The most frustrating part was that I think Lewis ended up getting like 13th fastest time. Charles, because Lewis and Charles were running a different, I guess, like setup, Charles had enough fuel to run an extra lap and he ended up bumping himself up to, I think, like 7th or something.
Lewis did not.
Lewis didn't have enough fuel to do another lap. And it was just so, like, don't do this to him. Don't do this to him at Silverstone.
Yeah. But my argument is they would never have done that to Charles in Monaco.
Yeah. So, knocked out of that first session was Liam Lawson, Gabby Bortoletto, Lance Stroll, Niko Hulkenberg, and obviously Franco Colapinto. Moving on to Q2, Max was putting in good times during quali, placing the fastest time of the session. Next, Oscar placed the exact same time, so like second to millisecond to like, yeah. Since Max placed it first, he would retain the lead unless someone else could get a faster time. So for those that don't, or like have never seen it before, if whoever is the first person to put that time up stays there. They've won it first, so they don't get bumped out. The second person who has that time is just always going to be automatically second behind them. It's always, I feel like it's how it's been since we've watched. It's just, I mean, it makes sense. Then Lando put in a faster time. The Ferraris were once again stressing everyone out, and they were able to put on fresh tires, and came to the top of the charts. Knocked out of that session, unfortunately, was Carlos, Yuki, Isaac, Alex, and Esteban. So Williams is pretty bummed. I feel like it's one of the rare times that they don't have at least someone in Q3 this season.
So Alex had performed really well in Q1, like was in like the top 6 or something like that. And in between Q1 and Q2, I think they made an adjustment to his car. I think Alex thinking that it was going to end up being better and it ended up not, because on the radio he came on after Q2 and was like, sorry guys, like it ended up not being great, like my bad.
Yeah.
It was something that, like, it was very obviously that there was something had been done to the car, and it was, I mean, you try stuff and sometimes it doesn't work.
And who knows if he was referring to like an upgrade that just like went sour, who knows, you know.
Yeah, you never know.
Q3. Oscar and Lewis set the initial fastest times. Again, very exciting for all of the Brits. In the past, Lewis has had 8 pole positions at Silverstone, so the performance pressure was there. I think everyone has been concerned about Ferrari, both drivers. It's really been kind of lackluster mid, I feel like.
I think it's been an average season for them. I just think that their fans expect greatness 24/7.
Yeah.
And so do they.
So, Max once again set an insane lap and took pole position from Oscar, and sadly Lewis was only able to get up to 5th. So the top 10 was Max with the fastest time, Oscar in 2nd, Lando in 3rd, George in 4th, Lewis in 5th, Charles in 6th, Kimi in 7th, Ollie in 8th, Fernando in 9th, and Pierre in 10th. So Kimi would end up moving back 3 places, and then Ollie, unfortunately, would move back those 10 places, which
was sad.
Yeah. So that was quali.
Okay. I feel like I was gonna make a comment on quali, but I think it was all covered. Yeah. Okay. We are gonna get into the main occasion, the race. To start off race day, it was pouring rain the moment we turned on the TV. And then it cleared up for a bit, which was great, but then the track was still wet and there was forecast for more rain to be coming. So
it was also, I know Emma just said this, but like it was enough rain that the track wasn't drying. That was the problem. Even when the cars ended up out, like the track just it was soaked.
Yeah. So we finally get out to it's not raining right now, and all the cars are like getting out onto the grid. And then you see all the tents go up because it's starting to rain a bit.
The tents, the umbrellas.
They put tents over the cars.
Oh, I thought you meant okay. Never mind.
No, the tents over the cars.
Oh.
And then we see that everybody's going to be on inters for this. There was no chance that people were going to take a chance with slicks.
Yeah.
So the formation laps starts and everybody is on inters at first. And then once the formation lap is getting going, people are like, it's kind of drying.
People give up their...
I've never seen this before to this extent.
To go into the pits. It was crazy.
Yeah. So, Charles, Isaac, Gabby, Ollie, and Franco all went in for slicks. The top 4 stay in order, and it is kind of crazy off the start immediately. So Liam Lawson goes off immediately. There's a yellow flag. He's fine. He comes back. This was the story of the race. The amount of people I saw go off, if they were still doing penalties for track limits, oh my God.
It would have been insane.
The amount of penalties people would have had to serve is insane. It would have made it for a really interesting time.
Yeah.
But, Liam comes back on, and Lewis is actually really close to passing Lando, pretty close to the start. But Lando ends up using like the whole track, and I would say it was honestly some of Lando's better defending that I've seen him do. I feel like his defending can be a little snappy sometimes.
Yeah.
Where this I felt like was really smooth. So that was really nice to see. Lap 4 happens, and we have a virtual safety car. So at this point, apparently Franco Colapinto is out. We had no idea. It wasn't announced, and all of a sudden you just see out.
Yeah, it really was completely glossed over. It was a little confusing as a spectator because, it took them a good, I feel like 10 or 15 minutes to acknowledge, finally, after, shocker, a few more people get out. They, run through why everyone... dropped out, and I don't know. It was confusing. It was
very strange. But now Liam Lawson ends up retiring because he cannot continue. Lap 4, once the restart happens, we have Gabby Bortoletto actually end up crashing. And it was a full crash. A yellow flag goes up, and then a VSC comes out. And he ends up pulling forward a little bit because I think he was like, oh, maybe I can move, but...
His engineer was pretty adamant of, we can't...
you'll be penalized now if you,
leave debris on the track.
Which I understand.
Yeah.
And so it made more sense. And to be honest, some of the cars in the past, when they're driving basically without a tire, that has got to do so much more damage to the car than if they just stop moving and then they have a crane pick up the car. Yeah. And that's going to cost them so much more money to deal with the damage that you're doing to the car.
Sheer determination of maybe if I get it back in, I'll...
No, 100%. That's definitely what they think. Yeah. But I don't know if it's worth it. And so obviously a VSC comes out and he pulls forward. I think he pulled in a place where it would be a little bit easier for them to kind of grab him, I think.
Yeah.
So then by lap 7, we actually see some people go in to go get some slick tires. We saw Lance Stroll go in because I think it was starting to dry a bit, and some of them were like, I can't deal with these inters anymore. I think this went to go bite those people in the ass, but That's my opinion. Lap 7, the VSC goes in. Obviously, there's no actual car, but virtually it goes in. And Oscar at this point is all over the back of Max. Like, I think that you could tell Max was stressed and Oscar was feeling great.
Yeah.
He was like, I can do this, no problem. By lap 8, we see Oscar pass Max. And we knew that rain was coming, and so did the drivers, but some of them, again, like Stroll, took the chance on putting slate tires on.
Yeah.
Lap 11, the rain ends up coming down, and it is coming down. At this point, the drivers are trying to figure out if they need new inters or not, because it had dried enough the track that like their inters were kind of shredding, and so they didn't have any grooves anymore.
Well, and you want those grooves. Like, that's what makes it so much better than a slick tire. And so at that point, it's like, how much have we broken down? Because they were on a fairly dry course
Yeah, they like
for a while.
burn basically when it's not wet.
Yeah. Which is why you'll see them weave so much when they're on inters under certain conditions, like
to
safety
cool
cars,
the tires
to
down.
cool the tires.
Yeah. So Oscar gets called into the pit at lap 11, and Max is like, my inters are dead. And at this point, Lando was on Max. And once Lando was on Max, and then Max ends up spinning off.
Yeah.
There were several times where I'm like, I've never seen Max do this before.
Everyone was having incidents like that, though.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone went without having some sort of difficulty or slide.
Yeah. Lap 13, we see Lando is still right behind Max, and Lando cannot see anything for the life of him. It was actually terrifying seeing some of the driver cams. I'm like, I can't see shit.
Yeah, they show you Isaac.
We'll get to that.
And
that's about to come out. The safety car ends up coming out because of the rain, obviously. But that it ended up only being out for like 5 laps, because by the time lap 18 came in, the safety car ended up going in. But then in that same lap, Isaac is out because he ends up crashing into he rear-ended Kimi.
Yeah.
The safety car was the safety car in yet? I don't know if the safety car was in yet. He crashed into the back of Kimi right by Cobb's corner, and all you see is a sheet of rain in Isaac's car,
And then Kimi, the back of Kimi's car,
in the front of Isaac's.
Isaac's car is already hitting.
There was no way for him to know.
Yeah, and it was funny. Well, not funny, but it was just like crazy to see, because Isaac is the F2 driver who had that insane reaction in Monaco last year. The video ended up going viral. And it was Isaac, so it like shows you how fast his reflexes are that he avoided a horrific crash. This came out of nowhere. It was actually scary.
Yeah. And so I wish that the safety car had stayed out for a little bit longer, but it is what it is. And so that happens because of that, a safety car obviously has to come back out, because then we have to collect the car. So the restart finally happens. Lap 22. What is it? I think there's like 5 restarts in this whole race. Max goes ahead of Oscar before the restart. So this is a point of contention. So Oscar is leading at this point.
It's Oscar, Max, Lando.
And Oscar's right behind the safety car, and Oscar brakes behind the safety car to a point where the FIA believes it to be an erratic braking.
Well, and so the whole point, the way Oscar explained it, and I'm ad-libbing, so if I get anything incorrect, just go watch his interviews. But he basically said that he hit his brakes to slow down at the same time that the lights for the safety car went off. And so it wasn't him trying to cause erratic braking, it was just him like trying to bunch up the grid. So that when they did start, it was just like a little bit more bunched up. Max obviously gets on the radio and is like, erratic driving, he braked, like, I don't understand what he's doing. And all of a sudden you get the ribbon at the top of the page, like, Oscar Piastri, like, safety car infringement under investigation.
So the reason why this is controversial is because George did something very similar, apparently, when in Canada. I can't remember exactly what it was, but apparently he did something very similar then. The difference was it was torrential downpouring here, and people could barely see like a few feet in front of them. And so
Yeah.
I think that's why the FIA were so harsh with their penalty. I think we can all agree, as much as Oscar fans that we are, we can all agree that what he did was it should have deserved a penalty. But as harsh of a one that he got, I don't necessarily agree with that. And I think that's what most people are saying. Like a 5 second would have made sense, but in the end, after the FIA reviewed it, he ended up getting a 10-second penalty, which is really intense.
I think it also goes to show when you have David Coulthard and Jolyon Palmer both kind of gasp a little at the aggression in the choice of penalty.
And that's happened several times this season.
Yeah, they love to throw out the 10 place grid penalty and the 10-second penalty, and it sucks. Like, and I think it kind of ruined the race for the pundits, because at that point,
it's not a race for first anymore.
It's not a race for first. Lando just needs to guarantee that he can, one, move past Max, and then two, just stay with under 10 seconds, if not past Oscar. Like, they sit there and they complain and they bitch and moan that, like, oh, the fans aren't getting the fights, they're not getting, and then they go and do this. So it's like,
if you had given him a 5 second penalty, it would have been a race to the end for the win.
Yeah, like, work smarter. Jesus, it's not that hard. I don't know, like, how
don't give us more sprint races. Stop being dumb with your penalties.
Yeah, but yeah, so then the irony of the whole situation was that off of that restart, Max ended up spinning out.
Yeah, and, so Max, I think Max was like overwhelmed and he like didn't know how to recover from it.
I said this to Emma when we were watching the race. I feel like Max's biggest enemy is himself when he's flustered.
Yeah. And so he was flustered in that moment, and the restart finally happens, and he ends up spinning out, and then he ends up dropping from second place down to 11th place. From second to 11th, which is crazy. Well, and also, even as the restart happened, when Oscar broke, Max went ahead of him in that braking zone right there, and like, to be honest, when we first initially watched it, I was like, oh, this is just Max doing Max, because that's what he does.
Yeah.
He like gets so close that he's almost about to pass somebody. That's what he did to George. I remember this now. That's what he did to George when we were when it was in Canada.
Yeah.
And Max didn't get a penalty for it, I don't think.
Well, we'll see what happens in the next two races, because I feel like it will be.
I think people are going to take it very seriously now and not take a chance that they're going to get a penalty. So, Max ends up spinning out at the restart, bringing him down from second to 11th. Ollie was clipped by Yuki and ends up spinning, but he rejoins. I feel like Ollie and Esteban were spinning all over the place. Lap 23, Kimi was told to retire the car. So this was due to the damage that resulted from the crash with Isaac, because the rear of the car is where like a lot of the sensitive aspects of it are. And so if you crash the rear of the car, it's almost, it needs to retire at that point. And the floor was all messed up as well. So it is what it is. That is 2 DNFs in a row though for Kimi, which is kind of unfortunate. But again, it happens to a lot of drivers.
And this one wasn't his fault. Like, I hate to say it. Obviously, the one in Austria was, like, he fully admitted to it. It was just a mistake. But this was, like, he was just a victim of...
They were both racing incidents, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Lap 24, we do see... slide for Lewis and George. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Lewis ends up, like, spinning out a little bit, and so then George ends up passing him. I believe Lewis ends up passing George again once he recovers, but then eventually George passes Lewis again, I think it was. This is when we find out that Oscar got his 10-second time penalty, and we also found out that Yuki got a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Ollie. Yuki's just taking all the hits again. I feel so bad for that man.
Yeah.
Free him.
I feel like we've also, like, heard nothing from him, too.
It makes me really sad. At the beginning of the season, I was really enjoying seeing Yuki in Visa Cash Out. So, by lap 30, we see Lewis pass Pierre for 5th place. And then now there's going to be a battle between Lance Stroll, Niko Hulkenberg, and Lewis Hamilton for 3rd place at the British Grand Prix. And let me remind you, Lance Stroll's last podium was like 4 or 5 years ago. Hulkenberg's never been on the podium. And Lewis has been in the top 3 every single time that he has ever raced in the British Grand Prix. So, kind of an overwhelming moment for all 3 of them.
I also want to make a mention that Niko Hulkenberg started in 19th.
Yeah.
He started in 19th.
Yep.
Just remember that.
Lap 35, we see Niko Hulkenberg pass Stroll for 3rd.
Lance was dying. Like, all of a sudden, the Aston just, like, shit the bed, it feels like.
Yeah. They were better this weekend, though.
They were better this weekend, but it feels like I never thought I would say this. It was like the Sauber and the Ferrari were just able to hold on longer.
Yeah. I don't know where the speed in the Sauber came from, to be honest, but...
I will also say, though, Lance was defending against
Lance was
Niko.
good. Yeah. I also just think, again, we never hear from Lance, so we don't...
Yeah. So I'm shocked. Amazing. You did good, kid.
Lap 35, Hulkenberg ends up passing Lance Stroll. You heard cheers around the world. Everywhere. People were shouting. People were screaming.
At this point, he's 3rd.
Yes, but there are still about 20 laps left of the race. So everyone's hearts are freaking out. I was like literally practically biting my nails. It was intense. So Lewis also ends up passing Lance. And then this is when everyone is like, oh God, you have 7-time?
Mm-hmm.
7? Yes. 7-time world champion. At first I was like 8? 7? 8? Never got the 8th. Not yet. 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, chasing down the guy who has never gotten a podium in his 15-year-long career.
239 race starts and no podium. Like,
the worst stat to have.
Well, it's the worst stat to have. It's a stat that they always bring up. Like, since we started watching, they always drop it in. And then just the fact that, like, as spectators, all of a sudden you're like, both stories are so beautiful. Like, I don't know who to cheer for.
We'll get more into the Lewis and Hulk stuff after, like, in the final thoughts. But let me try to get through the rest of this. So, Max, now at this point, he ends up passing Carlos for 9th because there's still stuff going on in the back of the grid, middle of the grid. Lap 38, we see Fernando Alonso go in for some slick tires, and Fernando was like, why? Fernando was pissed that Lance had gotten a different strategy than him, and so Fernando was like, I want slicks now, and so they listened to him.
And he got like a little mean with his engineer to the point that I said, Emma, I was like, if Fernando Alonso said that to me, I would cry, because he basically was like, you always seem to get the strategy wrong. Like, it was something along those lines.
No, I think it was like, well, you always get it right for Lance, but you never get it right for me.
Yeah, but it was just, I was like, oh my God, I would cry.
Lap 39, we see George go in for slicks, and he ends up getting hards, but George is, like, spinning around. And I think those who ended up getting slicks really benefited for 10 laps, but then the last few laps, it ended up pouring. And, like, I just don't think that... it didn't pour the last few laps. It was just... The track was still too wet.
Yeah.
So... we see now Lewis, Max, Lance, Pierre, and Carlos all go in for slicks for some reason. And both Lewis and Charles go off of the track. George spun around. Everyone who went in for slicks, nobody was keeping it on track very easily.
So stressful.
I don't know who thought it was a great idea. But then now it's finally, everyone's kind of getting slicks at this point. Hulkenberg ends up pitting lap 43 for mediums. This is when everyone was like, oh my gosh, this just ruined his race.
Yeah.
In fact, did not. He came out still in 3rd. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar pits and ends up serving his penalty so he can get new tires. And then Lando ends up pitting by lap 45. There is a yellow flag for a second because Ocon, he went off and he ends up rejoining. It was because of him and Ollie crashing, kind of. It was really Ollie hitting Esteban.
I think Ollie was also the last rookie standing.
He was the only rookie that finished.
Yeah.
So now for the last 8 laps of the race, it was like everybody hold our breath while we wait for Hulkenberg.
We watch Hulkenberg and we watch Hamilton.
Well, and so once Oscar finished once he served his time penalty, It was really obvious. He came out, and there was basically not really any chance for him to end up catching first.
He was about 5.5 seconds behind Lando when he first came out, and
this is where it was like, okay, so if you had given him a 5-second time penalty, then he would have come out about half a second ahead of his teammate. That would have made for a phenomenal finish. You have Hulkenberg, who has never been on a podium, in a podium place at the moment, and then you have the two McLarens who are in the championship battle fighting it out to the very end, and one of them, it's their home race, and one of them crashed out of their home race, and that would have been epic, but y'all decided to be a little harsh. And so we see Lewis kind of catching up to Hulkenberg for a bit, and the panic is kind of setting in because there was one or two laps.
Or less than a second.
No. It was like 7 seconds. And he was starting to crawl down. And so it was like within like 2 laps, he had crawled down 2 seconds closer.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he stopped getting any closer, and then he actually dropped back a bit, which made no sense. But he dropped back to like 7 seconds or so.
I think his tires.
Yeah.
I don't think he could do it.
And watching Hulk for those last few laps was like some of my favorites ever watching.
Yeah.
I was like, keep it on track. Don't do a George Russell Singapore
so
2023.
Clean. Like, I said this to Emma. I feel like when he switched to the slicks, I was like, oh god, he's gonna he's gonna lock up, or he's gonna just slide, or he's gonna go into the gravel. And I do feel like he had such a clean drive.
Yeah,
like
he had the perfect
compared
drive
to everyone else, because that was also what was affecting Lewis a little bit. Was he was making not simple. He was making like small mistakes, or his car was catching in ways that he would he would end up not hitting the racing line. So
yeah, and there were points in those last few laps where Oscar had even asked the team if they could switch back, and people are calling it like bad sportsmanship now, which I disagree with. I think
he said something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he said well, I figured I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, he's like, I know it wasn't gonna happen.
Might as well ask. I mean, I gotta give him credit for that. Might as well ask. Better ask for permission, I guess.
Yeah.
So the race finish ended up P1 was Lando, P2 was Oscar, P3 was Hulkenberg, and I can't remember anybody else because nobody else mattered in my eyes after that.
I think Lewis got 4.
I think so, yeah.
That's funny.
That's all that mattered. I don't remember where anybody else finished because I was just happy about Hulkenberg. Yeah. So we're going to get into our final thoughts now and talk a bit more about Hulkenberg and Lewis and kind of everything else. Niko Hulkenberg has been racing for something over 15 years and in F1. There was a year or two break there for a second where he thought he would never get back into F1. And for this entire time, he has had the statistic that he has had the longest career without a podium finish. And now, after 239 race starts, Niko Hulkenberg finally got that podium finish.
I don't think, anyone thought it was going to happen. I don't think it was on anyone's 2025 bingo card. No offense to Sauber, but they were rough. They
celebrated getting 1 point last year.
Yeah, and, I think maybe this is a sign of changing times. I mean, I think we're having a lot of that.
I think there's a drastic difference between Sauber as a team last year and this year. Yeah. They didn't even have a team principal last year.
Yeah. I'm excited too. I like Jonathan Wheatley. I like what he brings to the table. Him. I think that there's an and a pride that I think you see in Haas's team principal.
Yeah.
And you see in Jonathan Wheatley. I think you even see it in Laurent Mekies. How proud he is of the guys, and when Racing Bull does well. But I just, it was one of those moments that I don't think any of us really saw it happening in Hulkenberg's career.
I think you always have that hope that someone who's waited this long and so Niko, he won GP2 in 2009, I think it was. He was a very successful younger driver coming up into F1.
I'm pretty sure there's crazy stats that he's deemed one of the most consistent drivers, which is
and that's why he's had such a long career. He's so consistently, and
And
he's always been
teams-
given like the shitty team and the shitty
because
car.
they need the help with the development.
And so he always ends up getting that shitty car to like somehow getting it points. And he consistently is getting the back end of the points every single time. And he was so fortunate to get that spot at Haas again.
Yeah.
And then being called over to Sauber, which will eventually be Audi next year. I think that this is probably just a really great start to their partnership. It was just really nice to see somebody who very much deserves it.
Yeah.
And like you can tell that they've tried for so long. And it was actually so cute. He didn't even realize he had to bring his helmet into the cool down room. And so Lando grabbed it for him. And it was this conversation that was had in the cool down room was very interesting.
Well, I also want to, before we get into that, I just want to shout out that Kevin Magnussen was there too.
I know, his husband.
Yeah, he was standing in the Sauber. It was like, wow, fairy tales really
I
do
know.
come true.
Nico and K-Mag went from Nico running up to him yelling, "Suck my balls," to K-Mag being there for his first podium.
Yeah.
Like,
so what did you find interesting about the cool down room?
so Nico walks into the cool down room and Oscar Piastri's just sitting there all by himself in his lonesome. And Nico sits down in his chair and Nico asks like about kind of what had happened. And he was like, and Oscar was like, yeah, I broke, but then I got like a 10-second penalty for it and something like that, blah, blah, blah. But like I think Oscar was like, I was just breaking, like it wasn't anything like out of the ordinary. And then Nico was like, well, it did end up causing like a pileup with the cars around me in the back. Like we ended up having to like avoid each other because of it.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, and people were like, "Damn, Nico!" Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably also why he got like that big of a penalty. Like, you could have caused like a crash amongst several cars, and no one can see anything. And so I can understand it from that perspective. But people are like, the only people who can say that kind of stuff to the younger drivers are the old ones who have had over a decade of experience in F1.
Yeah, and I think it's like a learning moment for a lot of people. You know,
I think it's definitely a learning moment for Oscar.
Yeah.
I really do think the Drivers' Championship is honestly going to come down to like the last or second to last race at this point because it's close. It's very close.
Yeah, we shall see.
Yeah, who knows? So it was really exciting to see this for Nico. The people have some issues with the trophies because the trophies that
people are mad.
Second and third place got. I can understand Lando ended up getting like
a golden trophy.
And then he also got that in Lego form. And then second and third place only got a Lego form trophy. Which is kind of like you couldn't give them all real trophies. And the Lego be like a fun little collab or something. But in like the post-race conference, Oscar had asked Nico about it, and Nico was like, well, my daughter can play with the Legos, so like I don't really mind it actually.
Yeah.
I do love how he always brings his like family into it brings me a lot of joy. Yeah, my only problem I had with the ending was Lando and Oscar not spraying Nico very much.
Yeah, people are pissed about that too, and I'm just like, I'm
not gonna police every action that they do.
Yeah, I'm just like,
I'm like, this was such a big moment, and you know it was such a big moment. Y'all couldn't spray him.
I think there's also probably just like you don't even realize like how much everything is a blur in that moment, especially with those emotions.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Oscar was probably fuming. Lando was like, I just want my
Lando
home
was probably
race.
like, I just want everyone to be happy.
And then Nico was like, I just finally did it. Like, I don't think
like,
Nico.
I can't believe it.
I feel like Nico probably didn't even realize.
Yeah.
And like the whole crowd was cheering Nico. You saw when Nico got out of his car, you saw Gabby run over to him.
On socials, it feels like almost every single driver on the grid has congratulated him.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's special.
Well, and apparently it was Gabby who had handed the phone to Nico. Gabby had called Nico's wife and handed the FaceTime over to Nico.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was Gabby who had done that, but people have confirmed it was him, which was really sweet. Yeah, no, it was overall great. I feel like the Silverstone and the British Grand Prix always ends up delivering. Like last year, I sobbed watching Lewis win for the first time in forever. The year before, it was like magical for that first lap watching Lando, like hearing like Lando Norris leads the British Grand Prix. Like that was epic, and he ended up getting second place, and like that was really like, oh, McLaren's on it now. Like,
Yeah.
and this year with a Brit winning and Nico,
It manages. I never have to doubt it, and it manages to hit the feels every time.
every time.
You know, I think this year was the first time I was like, oh gosh. Because practice and quali was, I feel like, besides the crashes, which obviously, but I feel like it's typical with some of the rookies. I feel like it was just pretty sleepy. Like, it wasn't, nothing was surprising. But
Yeah.
to see Niko move from 19th to 3rd was definitely amazing. A good surprise.
Yeah. Lewis. I think Lewis did pretty well for himself.
I think Lewis ended up getting 4th. I don't think in Lewis's entire career, I don't think he's placed lower than 3rd at this race.
No, he hasn't.
So unfortunately, you know,
people were like, if I had to trade Lewis not getting a podium for Nico's podium, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and I think we were as fans in a rock and a hard place. I do think that this is good for Ferrari, though. You know, they're up higher. They're getting closer to a podium. Lewis is getting closer to a podium in Ferrari. I think that Tifosi is chomping at the bit a bit.
I mean, Monza's like 2 months away.
Yeah, so I definitely think this was a better performance for Ferrari. I do think the rumors around Fred have died down.
Good,
the replacement of Fred. I feel like no one's really talking about it anymore.
No, the only drama that people are talking about is the George Max, potentially Max replacing George at Mercedes.
But it's F1, so I'm sure in 2 days we'll have a new headline.
That's very true. Oh, something I also forgot about Niko. Apparently Sauber didn't have any champagne to celebrate his win. Not win.
His win.
His podium. It felt like a win. His podium. And so Mercedes and Aston Martin ended up dropping off champagne to allow them to celebrate the right way, which was really nice. Yeah. Anything else?
No, it was a great weekend.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Oscar takes this.
I feel like he'll be over it. I feel like he's already over it.
He's probably already over it
and
is ready to move along. But, you know, people are going to bring it up the very next time the press conference happens.
And he's going to say something snarky that's going to be dryly sarcastic, and then the internet's going to be in a tizzy, and half the people are going to be like, he's so funny, I totally get it, and the other half is going to be like, that was so mean.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen.
All right. Any IndyCar stuff?
No, not really. I'm going to be honest, I was pretty fried yesterday, too. I was trying to pay attention. Scott Dixon ended up winning, which was exciting because Kyle Kirkwood's been, like, dominating.
That's finally the third race winner this season. It's just been Alex Palou, and Kyle Kirkwood. So now we finally have a third race winner.
I also think it's something absolutely crazy, like Scott Dixon's 21st consecutive year of like winning one race a season. Something crazy. Like they were showing like the graphic for it, and I was like, Jesus Christ. But
RIP Penske, basically.
Yeah, I would love to know. You know, they have 3 of the biggest names in IndyCar, if not like
what's gonna happen
3 top dogs. Where are they gonna go? What's gonna happen?
This is like Joseph Newgarden's worst season since like his rookie year.
I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel like, and obviously I know that like they're not the 3 oldest guys on the grid, obviously with like someone like Scott Dixon, but I feel like Joseph Newgarden, Scott McLaughlin, and Will Power just seem like they're in their like 30s or 40s when everyone else feels like they're in their 20s. And so I'm like, what team are you going to get integrated in? Because like it feels like you 3 make sense being one team.
They feel like they're like graduate students or like PhD students like walking into an undergrad bar.
Yeah. And I'm like, what team are you going to be integrated in? Because everyone else is like under 25, it feels like. And I know that they're not all. But the 3 of them together make sense, but I can't figure out
I guess they're all going to be like the dad of their team.
Well, and I'm also just like, because we've never really watched IndyCar, so I don't know how they're like, I don't know the contracts. I don't know when contracts get settled, and
I don't know how long
I don't
their
know how
contracts
long those 3 drivers have with Penske. But like,
If anybody has any ideas, please let us know.
I would be freaking out if I was them. I would be on the phone with my lawyer, just like, how do you get me out of this? I feel like I sold my soul to the devil.
Yeah, it's definitely not great.
Yeah.
Well,
makes for great television.
It's been making for fantastic television. I hate to break it to you guys, but
and Joseph Newgarden crashing again.
I know. How many DNFs has he had now? I think
the last
five.
2 races.
5 this season. 5 DNFs this season,
or 5s in the last 12 months.
Yes, 5 in the last 12 months, and if you go beyond those 12 months, it would be 5 in the rest of his careers, other than his rookie year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So
I feel like he's gonna start to have an eye twitch, he's just a little too perfect. Where we're gonna see him and he's gonna be like, I'm fine. And just his eyes gonna start twitching.
Sometimes I'm waiting for him to smile at the camera and literally get blinded or something like in a cartoon. He feels almost he feels like
Mr. Clean,
animatronic, too perfect sometimes.
Yeah, he does give a little bit.
Pleasantville, my guy. It's okay to show that you're upset about this.
You can live life in color.
You can tell us. You can tell us that you're angry that your team is sucking right now.
Yeah. Instead, he'll just go for a run.
Yeah, he'll just go for a run and eat some vegetables and protein, and he's like, "I'm great. Everything's great."
As the eye starts to twitch,
he keeps yelling, "Everything's great!" as they yank him to the padded room.
Scott McLaughlin will power pull him into the padded room, locking themselves in.
All 3 together.
Yeah.
IndyCar's great, guys. Go watch it if you haven't. All right. Well, I don't even know what the next race is, to be honest. Budapest?
I can't tell you.
I don't know what the next F1 race is.
We're a mess. Life's a mess.
It's something. It's in a couple of weeks. It's not next weekend or the weekend after, I don't think.
We will be having a Get Ready episode.
Yes, we have the time for that.
We have the time. We'll be bringing you back more drivers and more races. I feel like I hit the nail on the head every time because I did my last one on Gerhard Berger.
And he was at the race.
And he was at the Austrian Grand Prix. So I was like...
Oh, I just remembered one last thing.
What?
Catherine Legg did really well in NASCAR this past weekend. It is now the most successful female in NASCAR since Danica Patrick. Which is finally...
We love her.
I love someone squashing Danica Patrick.
Yeah.
Danica, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's it for today. Make sure to subscribe, comment, follow, do all the things. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.